So let's start with the Ravens projected over-under win total of 9.5 games. I'm looking at this win total. I look at their offseason, specifically their sort of draft. Like I just love the Ravens draft and what they did. It feels like they really addressed in terms of building secondary depth, rebuilding that offensive line a bit. It feels like they really knew what they needed, and they made the most of it. They had something like 5 picks in the first 4 rounds, so it's good that you would expect them to rebuild some of these positional groups. But I look at what this team had roster-wise last year, and now bringing in a lot of young players. I don't necessarily think that these guys are all going to step in and be day one stars, but I think that this is a roster that's young, that is coached very well, and one of their big moves was trading Hollywood Brown, who people are like, oh, what are you going to do without him? I think Hollywood Brown sucks. I think that Rashad Bateman revealed himself to already be a largely superior player or version of that receiver. And between Mark Andrews and Rashad Bateman, we're looking at a really strong receiving group, despite the fact that there's no brand name talent there.
Yeah, I mean, if they could go out and potentially get themselves even an above-average receiver, whether it be in a trade, some maybe free agencies or anything like that, that team is going to be very tough to beat, especially if they can kind of get the running game going. But like you said, a healthy Lamar, Andrews, that's a tough, how are you going to stop that?
And one thing that I saw just looking into some of the preliminary stats for this Ravens team before the season, Lamar Jackson didn't have a rushing touchdown last year. This is a guy who is arguably the best running quarterback of all time, and this is a guy who could not get in the end zone as a rusher last year. And listen, especially in the early season, I think it was kind of lost amid the injuries. Lamar really progressed as a passer last year. He impressed the crap out of me in terms of what the throws he was making, especially down the field. So I'm very excited to see what Bateman, as a second-year guy in this offense, does. Mark Andrews was just a freakish talent last year. There's no other way to put it. He was on another level and revealed himself, I think, to be, at this time, the best tight end in the league. So if you put all that together, along with just things coming together defensively and that offensive line really coalescing, I think this is a team that should be the team to beat in this division.
I agree with you, yeah, and like you said, I mean, these guys are the team to beat. They're going to be there. They've have some people that have had some success, but if you're talking the win total of 9.5, I like them going over that. I really do. But I'm going to tell you what, if I had to make a prediction, I'm going to say 10-7 for the Ravens. All right, and 10 wins, it's not a lot, but the Bengals did it last year. At 10 wins, they got in, but you got to look too. I mean, they got to play the Bills, which isn't going to be an easy one, I believe, in week 4 or early in the season. Then they got to play the Bucks, which is never going to be one. The Broncos, which later in the year, but you never know really how the Broncos are going to shake out. Everybody says they're going to be a great team, but only time will tell.
Absolutely. So you're leaning on the over. I'm also leaning on the over for this Ravens team. One thing that I was looking at, just in terms of looking at this roster, and part of it is when looking at the schedule, they have a lot of these sort of marquee matchups with some of the best teams in the conference. I'm looking at maybe sprinkling something on Lamar to win MVP again, because it feels like there's some presumptive favorites in the MVP field, and we're now sort of moving away from Lamar in that area. If this is a team that I could realistically see them winning 12 games, and they could some of those 50-50 shots at the end of these games, the 2-point conversions, go their way. This could be a team that wins 12 or 13 games, and all of a sudden we're talking about Lamar as a guy who's making these game-winning plays in the biggest moments, and that's sort of what you need on your way to that MVP campaign. So I think that his odds are going to end up being pretty good. They're going to probably get a little better closer to the season when I think people really start taking a harder look at these rosters. But that's something that I'm going to keep in mind. What do you make of that that narrative that I've sort of created for myself there?
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. The reason I said 10 is, one, because you never know with the AFC North beating each other up a little bit. You never know. I mean, say, the Steelers have a down year, they could still upset them once, maybe twice. So you never really know how that goes. But then the tough conference schedule is pretty tough for Baltimore and the rest of the guys, the rest of the teams in the division. But I don't know if I like Lamar quite MVP, because you don't know how they shake out. One thing that does kind of, if I was a Ravens fan, maybe concern me is the new defensive coordinator. Not really sure how a defense responds to it. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not a good thing. And obviously, what's the old saying? Defense wins championships, so you have to see there. But one thing that I do like, that I'm probably going to sprinkle a little action on, is I think right now it's minus 140 for Baltimore to make the playoffs. So not only them, I do like them winning the division, which I believe is at plus 220, which I like that as well. I'm going to definitely hit that as a future, and I think the 140 as well, because not only winning the division I do like, but they could get in as a wild card.
I love that bet. I love that. I am buying in on this team completely as a playoff team. Even if they don't ultimately win that division, I don't see a world in which we're not talking about them come late December as a team that, even if they're a wild card, that everyone is scared to play. They don't want to go against this Lamar-led Ravens team in the playoffs because, listen, Lamar has been arguably the best running quarterback of all time, and if he can put it together as a passer and this defense holds up, I think that what you mentioned with that defensive schematic change, as much as that defense did really thrive the last several years, I think they were in need of that. Ultimately, that sort of cover zero, blitz everything approach had its limitations when facing some of the better quarterbacks in the conference. So I think that if you look at sort of how a lot of these real contenders in the AFC look now, I don't know if they would have ultimately been able to get away with that in the highest leverage moments against guys like Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Herbert especially.
Yep, and it's true, and not a lot of people remember that the Ravens did start off 8-3 last year before the injury bug did hit them, and then they finished 8-9, and just it got ugly quick for them. But one thing to keep in mind too is I believe it is a contract year for Lamar Jackson. We all know how players play when they're about to get paid, so that is another thing that definitely scares me as being a Steelers fan.
Lamar Jackson is his own agent and is in a contract year. I am. He won't even talk about his contract right now. I am terrified of this man. I could not be more afraid as a Steelers fan. It's impossible.
Yes, not a good look. But Anyways, I feel like we've talked too much. Like I don't think I've ever said the word Ravens out of my mouth as much as I have in these last couple of minutes. I'm feeling sick.
I think that they deserve the attention because I think we're going to talk about some teams in this division that we're not as high on.